tell me what kind of tree we have behind me? An oak tree, yes, great. You don't know which oak. Does anybody know which specific oak this is?
White.
White, excellent, yes. This is a white oak tree. And I took you out to this particular oak tree today because I think that this is one of the most beautiful trees in all of Schmeeckle. Especially with their low-hanging branches that are just reaching out to us. It's almost like this tree is wanting to shake our hands. Now, this oak tree is a great example of what other oak trees can achieve given the right growing conditions and space. This tree, if it continues at this rate, will eventually reach heights of 70 feet tall, and it could be about 70 to 80 feet wide. Quite the specimen of a tree.
Does the trunk always split like that?
The trunk is not always split like that. Now, the size of this tree is a great indicator as to what kind of tree it is, because white oaks are generally bigger than red oak trees. Since we're talking about red oaks, do any of y'all know how to tell the difference between a white oak from a red oak tree? Yes.
Shape of the leaves.
Shape of the leaves.
White has rounded leaves and red has pointed leaves.
How?
So the red ones are Indians with the arrows, and the white ones are brown with bullets.
Yeah, well, you beat me to it, yeah.
Does this drop acorns?
It does drop acorns, yes. Now, pin oaks are different and their leaves are a bit skinnier. Now, my go-to method for telling a red oak apart from a white oak is to look at the leaves of them. If any of you want to come a little closer to get a better look, come on up. Now, here we have the white oak tree leaf, and here's a red oak tree leaf. As my great friend explained to us, the lobes of a white oak are rounded compared to the lobes of a red oak tree, which are pointed and have a bit of a sharper appearance. Aside from looking at the leaves, you can also tell the trees apart just by looking at their bark. Now, red oak bark has a bit of a smoother appearance as compared to white oak trees. Now, although white oak trees have a more rigid bark, they still hold great value within. The value within I'm talking about is the wood of white oak trees. And the wood is highly commercialized lumber due to it being resistant to decay, it's impervious to water, and there's also a strong strength of the wood. Because of these qualities, this wood is used in a variety of products. One product in particular that this wood was used for was for building ships in the early 1800s. One ship in particular that was made out of white oak trees was the USS Constitution, or better known as Old Ironsides. Now, Old Ironsides served the United States military throughout the War of 1812 and helped us defeat the British once again. Now, after winning numerous naval battles, several restorations, and over 200 years later, the USS Constitution is still floating in the Boston Harbor to this day, just a testament to the strength and durability of white oak wood. Now, aside from providing a lot for us, oak trees are an abundant food source for the animals here at Schmeeckle. In fact, oak trees feed more than any other living organism, or oak trees are responsible for feeding more than any other living organisms compared to any other tree genus. So, oaks feed more animals compared to pines or maples. In fact, over 900 different species of caterpillars alone rely on white oak trees every year as a food source. I mean, with a wide tree canopy like this, full of their leafy greens, I can see how it's very desirable to a caterpillar. Now, can anybody tell me, what are the seeds of an oak tree called? Acorns, yes, acorns. Now, acorns alone are a very important part of are a very important part of many animals' diets. In fact, acorns are responsible for feeding up to 180 different species by themselves. The acorns will feed many different animals, ranging from crows to also feeding turkeys. Acorns are also responsible for helping feed larger mammals such as white-tailed deer. They also feed waterfowl like mallards, and also they feed raccoons. Just to name a few animals that rely heavily on a white oak tree's acorns. Now, what's one animal that we usually associate with acorns? Squirrels, yes. Squirrels. Squirrels are especially fond of acorns. And now, squirrels and oak trees have a very interesting relationship. Squirrels will hoard their food away for later times in what's known as food caches. These food caches are buried or hidden in trees. But squirrels will often forget where they buried their food cache, so that gives the acorns in that cache a chance to grow into being another oak tree. So it's quite fascinating to see oak trees providing for nature, and nature providing an opportunity for more oak trees right back. Now we're gonna head over to our next stop, and it's a bit of a walk away, so on the way there, think about your favorite tree again and think about the many ways that it provides for you and for nature. So, yeah.
I've noticed that there is very few acorns this year. Is there a reason why there is so few?
There is, yes. Now, oak trees will produce acorns every year, but some years are different, and that's because about once in every 5 years, or maybe once every 3 years, or once in every 10 years, there will be a great crop of acorns. So it's different for each species, but it's different for each species, and about every couple of years they'll produce a lot of acorns, or compared to other years where they'll produce just a few acorns. Yeah.
The furniture of the tables and the benches that are in the pavilion, are they made out of white oak?
I am not too sure about that actually, but I could ask around and figure out an answer for you before our
Because you say
program is
it's
over.
resistant to water, so.
Yeah.
What are the
Ask him.
The benches are ash. The benches and tables are ash.
They're heavy.
They're heavy. We wanted to make them out of white oak, but we could not find a source of dried white oak close by.
You better introduce yourself.
I thought we all pointed you out, Mike.
I'm Mike Arella. I'm one of the Friends of Schmeeckle Tuesday volunteers that does a lot of the work around the reserve. We did the fishing pier, and we're working on the overlook, and we did the tables and all of that. But yeah, we tried to get white oak, but we couldn't find a decent source.
Alrighty, well, follow me as we make our way over to our next stop now. That's so cool, I've never known at all. Alright, now we have reached our second stop of our walk. Does anybody know what this tree is on my left and on my right? It's the same species. Pine. Did somebody say white pine? White pine, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. These are eastern white pine trees. Now, many of you will probably recognize or already knew the name of this tree, and that's because eastern white pines are one of the most popular and most recognizable trees there are. Now, while it may be easy to recognize, don't get it confused with the other pine trees here in Schmeeckle. The other pine trees I'm referring to are jack pines and red pines. I'll now share a few ways to tell the differences between these pine trees. The first way that I tell the difference between a white pine from a red pine or a jack pine is to look at the bark of a tree. Here is the bark of a jack pine tree. Now, comparing the bark of a jack pine tree, you'll notice that there are several differences. For one, the jack pine bark is a bit more flaky in appearance as compared to the white pine tree. It's not as deeply furrowed as parts of a white pine bark are. And there's also shades of a light brown throughout the bark there, which you don't really see on a white pine tree. So jack pine, white pine. Now, comparing eastern white pine to the bark of a red pine tree, you can see those differences almost right away. They jump out at you. Now, on the red pine bark, you'll see that the bark is red in appearance and lighter gray as compared to the white pine here. It's also very flaky and it's not thick at all. So, two complete different barks for two complete different trees. Another good way of telling these trees apart is to look at their pine cones, as each pine cone for each tree is drastically different. Luckily, I've brought samples of each tree for us to look at. Unfortunately, I didn't bring enough samples for all of us. So here's the cone of a white pine. If you would like to take a closer look at that. Cone of a red pine tree. And then lastly, the pine of a jack, or the pine cone of a jack pine tree.
Oh my goodness. Oh, it's cute.
There's a white pine. Yeah, true size of a jack pine cone. I got it. Jack pine. So let's see, jack pine or a red pine cone? That's the red pine, yeah. You guys see the differences between these cones here? Long and skinny, white pine, smaller, red pine, smallest, jack pine. If anyone would like to get a closer look at the samples here, you can take them and look at them. Would you like to?
So, red pine, white pine, jack pine?
Almost.
White pine.
White, there you go, yep.
Okay. Oh, there.
That's a white pine.
That's a white pine.
That's a red.
That's white. Jack pines are really tight.
Here, go ahead and interpret this for the camera.
This is a red.
Okay.
No. White pine, red pine, jack pine.
There's a lot.
But not the color. The color stays the same. Yeah.
I think that.
Anybody?
These trees specifically, I don't know their age, but if I had to venture, I would guess that they're at least 80 years old. Now, should everybody get a good look at the pine cones? If you're holding any pine cones, if you could do me a favor and just toss one into the woods. Return them to where they belong. Now, continuing on, like white oak, white pine is also used for a variety of wooden products. Many products from furniture to building boats, and it's also the desired wood for when it comes to wood carving.
Wrong picture.
That's the wrong picture, I'm sorry. The desired wood for wood carving. You're welcome. Now, as I said, these trees were used for building ships. And similar to white pine being used for ships in the early 1800s, eastern white pine was also used for the same, and for ships in the 1700s as well. If you look up these trees, you'll see that they grow generally straight up. So that made them the desired trees to be used for making the mast of a ship. The mast is the big pole that would be in the middle that the sails would hang from. And these trees were so popular in being used for masts, that in the 13 colonies they were referred to as mast pines. Yes. And during that same time period, since we were still under British control and British rule, the British were harvesting as many white pines as they could from the colonies because they had harvested too many over in England. They also made it illegal for any colonists to cut down the white pines for their own use. So eventually, residents in a small town in New Hampshire got fed up with this unfair British rule, and they rioted against the British. So instead of paying the fines for chopping down a white pine tree, instead they beat up and chased the sheriff and deputy out of their town. This became known as the Pine Tree Riot, and this flag was created out of the Pine Tree Riot. And it's believed that the Pine Tree Riot sorry, I forgot where I was going there. Anyways, the symbol in the middle of the flag there is the eastern white pine, which is a symbol of freedom for the colonists that would hang this flag up. And it's believed that the Pine Tree Riot later inspired the Boston Tea Party that would happen several years later. Now, aside from during that same time period, these pine trees were serving Native American tribes on the land in a different way. When food was scarce, some Native American tribes would actually eat the inner bark of the white pine trees. Now, you all might be thinking that wood and bark isn't too appetizing, but I love this species so much that I would be willing to try some of that bark. Aside from being a food source, this tree also served those Native American tribes medicinally. They would boil water with pieces of the bark inside, and then they would pour that water on different wounds, rashes, or cuts that they had. Or they would drink that boiled bark water as cough medicine. So, essentially, Eastern White Pine is like a superstore, or your one-stop shop for all your needs. You can get food, medicine, shelter materials, and a reason to rebel against British authority. This tree has got it all for you. Now, we're going to be making our way over to our last stop of the day. And, oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And have their babies and whatever.
Yeah, a lot of small mammals will often use white pine trees as a habitat. And such as this cleft here, yeah, they can go up, burrow up in there, and make it their home. It's maple. Yep, you're on the right track. Sugar maple. Excellent. Great job, guys. Yes, this is a sugar maple tree. And you're probably wondering why I took you on this long walk all the way over here. And that's because this is the only sugar maple tree throughout Schmeeckle. I've spent a lot of time looking, and maybe I'm wrong and there are a few more, but this is the only sugar maple in Schmeeckle that I've found. So, sugar maples, if you didn't know, are the state tree of Wisconsin. And they have been our state tree ever since 1949. I see the sugar maples as a symbol of beauty throughout our state, especially with their wonderful fall colors. You might have seen their fall colors on their relative, the red maple, on our walk over here. Speaking of red maples, though, do y'all know how to tell the difference between a sugar maple from a red maple? Okay. Now, I know that a red maple and a sugar maple look awfully similar, and the bark pattern is about the same too. But when it comes to looking at their leaves, that's where you'll find the difference between the two. So if you need to come a little closer, I invite you to now to look at the differences between a sugar maple leaf and a red maple leaf. Now, these leaves look awfully similar, but if you look closely at the edge, you'll notice that there's different patterns. On the red maple leaf, you see that the edges are a bit serrated. Serrated, kind of like a saw blade. When on the sugar maple, you see that the edges are smooth all the way around and there's no serrations. So that's my go-to method of telling these two trees apart. Red maple, serrations; sugar maple, smooth. So, congratulations, you now know how to tell the difference between a sugar maple and a red maple tree. Another good way of telling these two trees apart is by looking at their samaras. The samaras of maples are their seeds, but they're better known by their nickname, helicopters. Any guesses as to why they're nicknamed helicopters? Because they spin around. Yep, because they spin. Yeah, so these seeds have a special winged adaptation to them that makes them spin around, and it helps them stay in the air longer. Would y'all like to see a demonstration of them in action?
Oh yeah.
All right. If I could have a few volunteers who would like to come up and show some samaras, that'd be wonderful. You want to help throw them? Here's a few for you. Yeah, would you guys like some samaras to throw up? I can give you a big handful. You want some too?
What do you think they're gonna do?
Would you like some samaras? Would anybody else like to throw some samaras up in the air?
Sure.
That's why I like it. It's such a neat looking tree.
These are from a variety. I got some from Norway maple. I got some from red maple. Now, would you like some as well? Me too. All right, now on the count of three, we'll all throw our samaras up in the air at the same time. Ready? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Look at all the spin down. Yes.
Can I ask, the sugar maples that we used to seeing more orange and red with the gold. The red maples are real dark, but this was looking real more yellow and white
Yeah.
that I was expecting. So
Yeah.
is there a certain reason there's a difference between orange and red?
If there is a certain reason, I do not know that reason, but I am curious to look into it some more myself now. So, now, that was a great example of samaras in action. I always love to see them spin around and fall like that. It makes me feel like I'm a kid again, walking with my mom in the neighborhood, throwing up samaras as we're going along. Now, aside from the visual stunning beauty that sugar maples provide us, they also provide us with many different wood products as well. And that's because sugar maples are one of the most valuable hardwood trees in the northern United States. So the wood of sugar maples is used in a variety of products, some being furniture and flooring, musical instruments, even bowling pins and bowling alleys. And also baseball bats. So, next baseball season, when you see Christian Yelich felt a home run for the Brewers, be sure to thank maple trees for helping make that possible.
Ah.
Say, what's one product that I'm sure you're all familiar with that also comes from sugar maples? You might have even had, it's sweet, and you might have had it for breakfast this morning. Maple syrup. Yeah, now maple syrup is a direct product of sugar maples. Let's see if this one has any for us today. The maple syrup is a direct product of the soft that comes from sugar maple trees. They don't just produce bottles of it though, where you can just pull out of the tree. Instead, it takes a lot of hard work. You have to tap in your spout and hang a bucket to collect all of the tree sap. And once you've collected enough sugar maple tree sap, you can then boil it down until you're left with your desired product of maple syrup. Now, sugar maple tree tapping and sap collecting is very popular in Wisconsin and is a fine tradition of many families. Now, aside from providing us with tasty treats, sugar maples are an abundant food source as well for the animals of Schmeeckle. Many animals will feed on their seeds, buds, twigs, and leaves, including squirrels, chipmunks, and white-tailed deer. In fact, another animal that you might have not expected that relies on sugar maples would be the porcupine. Now, especially in wintertime, a porcupine relies heavily on sugar maples as a food source. Porcupines will eat parts of the bark and parts of the upper tree stem. And sugar maples will make up about 25 to 50% of a porcupine's diet in the wintertime. So,
Does the bark taste like sugar?
you know, I do not know. Now, aside from being a food source for many different mammals, birds also rely on sugar maples just as much. Birds will rely on sugar maples as a food source and also as a habitat. One native species that relies heavily on the sugar maple is the black-capped chickadee,
Aw.
which will often build their nesting sites in sugar maple trees. Now, aside from providing for us and providing for animals, sugar maples also provide for the plants that grow around them. Sugar maples engage in what's known as a hydraulic lift. So the largest roots of a sugar maple go so deep in the ground that they're near the water table. It's the job of those roots to lift and pull up water from the water table for the sugar maple to use. But those roots often will draw up too much water, so any excess water is released into the surrounding soil. Plants growing around sugar maple will take advantage of that free water, especially in times of a drought. And it's been found that plants that are growing around sugar maples do better than plants that are growing further away from sugar maples. So now you know that sugar maples produce more than just maple syrup. Now we're going to start our walk back towards the Menzel Pavilion, and I know it's a bit of a walk away, so I prepared for you all a Schmeeckle I Spy Sheet you can do along the way. This I Spy Sheet is a list of the different trees and animals, and also a few other miscellaneous things that can be seen throughout your Schmeeckle. If you would like to take one for your walk back and be on the lookout for nature, come up and take one now. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You can always save it for another time.
I do have a clip when I come here and everything. I got a bag.
Oh,
I came prepared.
I do.
I see Christmas from.
It is the red pine, yeah. You want some? Yeah. I still have a few more if anybody's interested.
Yeah, it's for the students who are evaluation.
That's all right. Hey. Okay, now let's begin our journey back towards the Menzel Pavilion. And if you have your Schmeeckle I Spy, keep an eye out for any critters or trees that are listed on it. Let's go.